When I used to teach sex ed in the classroom, I used to ask the students, what's sex? Now, the majority of the time, a student would use slang and say something like, it's a penis and a hoo-ha. And I would give them praise for speaking up and say, yes, that's called vaginal sex, and it's when a penis enters a vagina. Then I would ask the class, does anybody know another type of sex? And this is when about 50% of the time, a student would say gay sex. Now, as a teacher, I make the assumption that the student is not being homophobic, but they genuinely may never have heard of the term anal sex. So in my response, I focus on educating and clarifying using medically accurate terminology. So I'd ask them, what do you mean by that? And they'll usually say something like, it's when a dude's thing goes into another dude's butthole. I would then clarify and say that is called anal sex. And in order for anyone to engage in anal sex, the two body parts that are needed is a penis and an anus. So let's talk about what is anal sex, who's having anal sex, and when to have this sex talk with your kid. I'm Kathleen, and I make videos for parents on how to have the modern day sex talks. Anal sex is when a penis goes into an anus, and it's also considered anal sex when an object goes into an anus, which can be a sex toy or a finger. The anus does not self-lubricate like the vagina, and the tissues of the anus are very thin and delicate and sensitive to tearing. Therefore, additional lubrication is absolutely necessary when having anal sex, and being relaxed is also necessary as the voluntary sphincter muscle needs to be relaxed in order to avoid tearing the anal tissue. And just like with any other sexual activity, some people enjoy having anal sex and some people don't. Anybody, no matter their sexual orientation, can participate in anal sex because everybody has an anus. People who enjoy having anal sex have anal sex. Some adults try out having anal sex and enjoy it, while others decide that it's not something they find to be very pleasurable. Curiosity around anal sex has increased over the decades among 16 to 24-year-olds, but the sex education around how to engage in anal sex safely is still somewhat taboo. According to a recent article out of the British Medical Journal, about 25% of young women and vulva owners have reported being pressured into having anal sex. And this has led to an increase in a variety of health issues, including fecal incontinence and anal sphincter injury. Anal bleeding or pain during or after anal sex is a sign of trauma to the anus. Lack of education and accurate information around anal sex has led adults and young people to think that anal sex should feel painful, when the reality is that no sex, including anal sex, should ever feel painful. Many parents don't talk about anal sex, assuming that their kid is not going to engage in the behavior, and this can be harmful to their sexual health. Parents, please don't make that assumption. If you have a child in the intermediate age, ages 7, 8, or 9, you must include anal sex when explaining what is sex. At this age, they're going to be surprised that adults even have sex and find the idea of having vaginal, anal, or oral sex just gross. But they will listen to you because it's interesting, and it's a good age to explain that adults have sex with other adults. If you want to know how to explain the different types of sex to your intermediate age kid, check out this video. Next, if you have a child in the middle school age range, ages 10, 11, and 12, you'll want to expand on the why people engage in anal sex. You can say something to the effect of, people have different motivations for having anal sex. Some people believe that because it's unlikely to get someone pregnant from anal sex, that it is safer. Or some people say anal sex isn't really sex. Anal sex is definitely real sex. It can feel pleasurable, and it can transmit STIs, and it can cause health issues in the anus if done without care. And for these reasons, it's an activity that only adults engage in. At the high school age, ages 13, 14, and 15, you will want to continue to layer information on top of what you've already discussed in the past. This can include a conversation on the prostate gland as another reason why adults engage in anal sex. Emphasizing that pain during any type of sex, including anal sex, is never okay. And a reminder that consent to any sexual activity is always required, and that it's not okay to pressure someone or to feel pressured into doing a sexual activity. By now, you've already had the porn literacy porn talk, so you don't need to go into what is porn, but it's a good opportunity to point out to them that the porn industry would make it seem that everybody engages in anal sex every time they have a sexual encounter. But that is adult entertainment trying to garner more views. Porn performers can choose whether or not they want to participate in an anal sex scene. Some do, some don't. And lastly, remind them that taking care of their sexual health is important. And no matter what type of sex they choose to engage in, they should never feel embarrassed to talk to you or a healthcare provider if they ever have pain or discomfort in their genitals or anus. Now, some of you may be thinking, this is way too much information for a sexual activity that not many people do. Well, according to the National Survey of Sexual Attitudes and Lifestyle in the UK, individuals who identify as heterosexual and participate in anal sex has risen from 12.5% to 28.5%. And the increased rates of injuries due to anal sex may be indicative of this rise in popularity. So a conversation specifically about sexual health care and anal sex can potentially provide the insight and education needed in order to prevent some serious health issues. If you found the information in this video to be helpful, please go on and give it a like and share it with a parent who you think may find it helpful as well. I'm Kathleen, and I'll be back next week with another video.